I never thought I'd be that woman, the one who would betray her husband so completely. But here I am, 5 months pregnant with another man's baby, staring at Donovan's shocked face as I tell him he needs to either raise this child as his own or walk away from our 10-year marriage. 3 years ago, I convinced him to get a vasectomy because I was certain I never wanted children. I used every manipulation tactic I knew to make him agree. His career aspirations, our travel plans, even his family history of genetic issues. He finally relented, trusting me completely. And how did I repay that trust? With a brief, passionate affair with Julian during that Tokyo project, followed by the most selfish ultimatum imaginable. The look in Donovan's eyes as he realized the extent of my betrayal still haunts me. But instead of apologizing, I doubled down. I told him it was his choice, raise another man's child or leave. I've meticulously planned every aspect of my life since I was 12 years old. My mother would call it controlling. I prefer to think of it as curating. From the double major in civil and architectural engineering to landing my dream job at Pentagram Design, every step has been deliberate, calculated, and executed with precision. My life is a masterpiece of my own creation, including my marriage to Donovan. The first time I met Donovan Wade was at a hospital fundraiser that my firm had designed the exhibition space for. He was handsome in the refined way of men who know their worth without needing to broadcast it, tall with warm brown skin, thoughtful eyes, and surgeon's hands that moved with deliberate grace as he explained pediatric cardiology to a donor. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but he fit perfectly into the life plan I'd designed. We were introduced by a mutual acquaintance who mentioned that Donovan had recently completed his fellowship. I remember calculating his probable income trajectory against his student debt, assessing whether he would be financially compatible with my 5-year plan. It sounds cold when I say it out loud, but that's how I've always navigated the world, through analysis and forecasting. "You must be the architect," he said when we were introduced, his smile genuine. "Architectural engineer," I corrected. "Imogen Calloway. The difference matters," he noted, which impressed me. Most people didn't understand the distinction. Donovan Wade, I fixed tiny hearts. That small exchange set the tone for our relationship. Precise, respectful, with each of us recognizing the expertise of the other. Our courtship was efficient. I appreciated that Donovan was as dedicated to his career as I was to mine. We quickly established a rhythm of scheduled dates, working around hospital shifts and project deadlines. Within 6 months, we had discussed our 5-year goals, retirement plans, and views on children. We both agreed that our careers would take precedence. Children were a firm no for me and a probably not for him. "I spend all day with kids," he said once over dinner. "I love them, but my schedule isn't conducive to raising them." I nodded, pleased. I've never felt the maternal instinct. My ambitions lie elsewhere. His eyes crinkled slightly at the edges. Where do they lie exactly? Partnership by 35. My own sustainability consulting firm by 40. A seat on the architectural review board for the city by 45. He laughed, but not unkindly. "You've got it all mapped out, don't you?" "Medicine is more fluid. I follow the research, the needs of my patients, but I admire your clarity." That was Donovan. Adaptable where I was rigid, fluid where I was structured. It created a balance between us, though in retrospect, I see how often that balance tipped in my favor. We married after 14 months of dating. The wedding was elegant, precisely budgeted, and executed according to schedule. My mother cried, not entirely from joy. She'd always worried about me, said I held myself too tightly. "Love isn't a business merger, Imogen," she told me the night before the wedding. "This isn't a merger, Mom. It's a partnership." "Does he know that? Or did you just decide it on your own like you decide everything?" Her words stung because they carried a grain of truth, but I brushed them aside like I did all criticisms that didn't align with my vision. The early years of our marriage were smooth. We bought a modernist home in a developing area of the city that my market research indicated would appreciate significantly within a decade. We established separate bank accounts with one joint account for household expenses. We took vacations that were planned 6 months in advance, alternating between his preference for beach resorts and my interest in architectural tours of historic cities. It was during our 3rd year of marriage that the topic of permanent birth control arose. I had been on oral contraceptives since college, but a new project at work involving hormone-disrupting building materials made me reconsider. I think one of us should consider a more permanent solution, I said one evening as we prepared dinner in our sleek kitchen. I was chopping vegetables with the precision my father had taught me, uniform pieces ensuring even cooking times. Donovan looked up from the fish he was seasoning. Are you thinking of getting your tubes tied? Actually, I was thinking you could get a vasectomy. It's less invasive, lower risk, faster recovery time. I laid out the facts the way I'd rehearsed them. Statistically, it makes more sense. He was quiet for a moment. Have you ever thought about changing your mind? About kids? No, I said firmly. My career is entering a critical phase. The Jakarta project alone will take 2 years to complete. Children have never been part of my plan. Plans can change, he said mildly. Not this one. I set down my knife. Have you changed your mind? Not exactly, he said carefully. But I've been working with this little girl, Zoe. She has a congenital heart defect, but she's the brightest, funniest kid. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like, having someone like that in our lives. A flicker of panic rose in my chest. This wasn't part of the script. Donovan, we agreed, 2 careers like ours don't leave room for children. I know, but people make it work all the time. At what cost? Compromised careers, financial strain, marital stress. The statistics on divorce rates for dual-career couples with children are not encouraging. I picked up my knife again, resuming my chopping with more force than necessary. Not everything comes down to statistics, Imogen. Facts are how we make informed decisions, I countered. He sighed, that small sound of yielding that I would come to know so well. Let me think about it. The conversation continued over the following weeks. I presented research on vasectomy safety, statistics on childless couples' happiness indices, projections of our retirement savings with and without the expense of children. I reminded him of trips we planned to take, career goals we'd set. I was relentless, though I framed it as thorough and responsible. What I never admitted, even to myself, was the real reason behind my insistence: fear. Not of motherhood itself, but of losing control. A child would introduce an unplannable variable into my carefully constructed life. It would make me vulnerable in ways I couldn't predict or manage. Donovan resisted longer than he usually did when we disagreed, but eventually he conceded. I scheduled the consultation for him, arranged to take the day off work to drive him to and from the procedure, and prepared our home with the recommended post-surgical comforts. The day of the procedure, as we sat in the waiting room, Donovan took my hand. You're sure about this? Absolutely sure. I'm sure, I said without hesitation. This is what's best for us. He nodded, squeezing my hand before releasing it. Then I'm sure too. The procedure went smoothly. Donovan recovered quickly, and our life resumed its carefully orchestrated rhythm. If sometimes I caught him watching children in parks or restaurants with a certain wistfulness, I chose not to notice. If occasionally he mentioned a particularly remarkable patient with more animation than usual, I steered the conversation toward other topics. 3 years passed in this manner. I secured the Jakarta project and was on track for partnership. Donovan was publishing groundbreaking research on pediatric valve replacements. We renovated our kitchen, traveled to Portugal and Japan, and maintained our scheduled date nights despite increasingly demanding careers. From the outside, our lives appeared perfect. Perhaps they were by the metrics I had established. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. I found myself staring at architectural plans without seeing them, dissatisfied with designs that would have excited me years before. I began staying late at the office not because the work demanded it, but because returning home meant facing the growing silence between Donovan and me. We still functioned well as a team, managing our household, attending events, planning for the future, but something essential had gone missing. I couldn't name it because I had never included it in my life's blueprint. It wasn't love exactly. I did love Donovan in my way. It was something more elemental, a hunger I hadn't accounted for. The Jakarta project became my escape. The complexity of designing a sustainable corporate campus in a developing urban environment with challenging climate conditions absorbed me completely. I threw myself into it with an intensity that surprised even my colleagues. You're going to burn out, my assistant warned. I'm fine, I insisted. This is just what the project needs. What I didn't say was that it was what I needed, a problem complex enough to distract me from the growing emptiness I felt. The more I worked, the less I had to acknowledge the flaw in my perfect design. That efficiency and planning weren't enough to build a fulfilling life. Donovan noticed my increased absences but said little. His own schedule had intensified with a new research initiative. We became ships passing in the night, exchanging information rather than confidences, sharing space rather than experiences. Then came the Tokyo Conference, a prestigious gathering of sustainable design leaders where I would present the preliminary Jakarta plans. It was a career-defining opportunity, and I prepared for it with characteristic thoroughness. What I couldn't prepare for was Julian Mercer. He was the client liaison for the Jakarta project, a British-educated Indonesian businessman with a passion for sustainable development. I had interacted with him via video conferences, but meeting him in person at the Tokyo conference was different. He had an energy that didn't translate through screens, a charismatic intensity coupled with a genuine interest in the human aspects of design, not just the technical specifications that usually dominated my thinking. Buildings should breathe with the people who inhabit them, he said during one panel discussion, challenging my emphasis on energy efficiency metrics. They should enhance human connection, not just reduce carbon footprints. I found myself both irritated by and drawn to his perspective. Over conference lunches and dinner meetings, we debated the balance between technical performance and human experience in design. He pushed me to think beyond my comfortable parameters, to consider elements I had dismissed as subjective and therefore less valuable. You design with your head, he told me one evening as we reviewed plans in the hotel's business center. What would happen if you designed with your heart as well? Inefficiency, I replied. Emotional decision-making compromises optimal outcomes. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Is that true in all areas of life, Imogen? Do you apply that same principle to your marriage? The question caught me off guard. I never discuss my personal life in professional settings. That's not relevant to this project, isn't it? We're designing spaces where people will spend most of their waking hours. How can we do that effectively if we divorce professional from personal, head from heart? His words unsettled me, not because they were inappropriate, but because they exposed a fault line in my thinking that I had worked hard to ignore. As the conference progressed, I found myself seeking out Julian's company, ostensibly to continue our professional discussions, but there was something more developing, an awareness that made my skin prickle when he entered a room, a tendency to laugh more freely in his presence than I had in years. On the final night of the conference, after a team dinner celebrating our successful presentation, Julian and I found ourselves alone in the hotel's rooftop garden. The Tokyo skyline glittered around us, a constellation of human ambition and engineering. Will you tell me something real, Imogen? He asked, his voice quiet beneath the distant hum of the city. Something not calculated or planned. Everything real can be calculated, I said, but the words felt hollow. I don't believe that. And I don't think you do either, not really. He was standing too close, the warmth of him tangible in the cool night air. I knew I should step away, maintain the professional boundary that had always defined my interactions. Instead, I found myself studying the curve of his mouth, wondering what it would be like to let go of control just once. What would you do if I kissed you right now? Julian asked, his eyes reflecting the Tokyo skyline. I should have said that I was married, that it was inappropriate, that we had a professional relationship to maintain. Instead, I said, I would let you. That moment of honesty, unplanned and unfiltered, broke something open inside me. When his lips met mine, I didn't think about Donovan or my career or the carefully constructed life waiting for me back home. I thought only of the sensation, the warmth spreading through my body, the liberation of abandoning control, if only for a moment. One kiss became two, then more. We moved from the rooftop garden to his hotel room without discussing it, as if following a script neither of us had consciously written. What happened there was everything my relationship with Donovan was not: impulsive, passionate, untethered from plans or expectations. In the morning, I woke before Julian and dressed quickly, my mind already compartmentalizing what had happened. This was an anomaly, I told myself, a momentary deviation that need not disrupt the overall trajectory of my life. I left a note thanking him for his insights on the project and slipped out before he woke. On the flight home, I constructed the narrative I would live with, a momentary lapse, meaningless in the grand scheme, a secret that would harm no one if kept. By the time the plane landed, I had filed the experience away in a mental drawer labeled Tokyo, separate from marriage and career and all the other categories that defined my existence. Donovan met me at the airport, looking tired but happy to see me. He kissed me on the cheek and took my carry-on. How was Tokyo? He asked as we walked to the parking garage. Productive, I said. The presentation was well received. We're moving forward with the Jakarta project as planned. That's great, he said, and I could hear the genuine pride in his voice. I knew you'd knock it out of the park. Guilt flickered briefly, but I pushed it aside. This was my reality. Donovan, our marriage, our life together. Tokyo was an aberration, already fading like a dream upon waking, except it didn't fade. Over the next weeks, as Julian and I resumed our professional interactions via video conference, I found myself thinking of that night with increasing frequency. Work became both a trigger for those memories and an escape from them. I stayed later at the office, telling Donovan it was the demands of the Jakarta project, when in reality it was the anticipation of those calls with Julian, the knowing glances, the private messages exchanged during group meetings, the thrill of our shared secret. The affair, if it could be called that, continued during video calls after others had left the meeting, through encrypted messages that grew increasingly intimate, and during a second trip to Singapore for a project review. Always, I told myself it was contained, separate from my real life, a temporary indulgence that would run its course. Then came the message from Julian that changed everything. We need to talk, not about work. During our next private call, he looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. I've been offered a position in London, he said. I'm taking it. Congratulations, I said, ignoring the unexpected pang of loss. That's a great opportunity. There's more, he continued. My wife and I have been separated for nearly 2 years. We've been trying to work things out for our children's sake. She's agreed to move to London with me to give our marriage another chance. The word wife hit me like a physical blow. In all our conversations, all our intimacies, he had never mentioned a wife. I had never asked. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I wish you all the best. Imogen, he said, his expression pained. What we had was a professional collaboration with some extracurricular activities. I finished for him. Nothing more, we both know that. He looked like he wanted to say more, but in the end, he just nodded. The London team will take over as client liaison for Jakarta. You'll be hearing from them next week. I look forward to it, I said, and ended the call before he could respond. I sat in my office for a long time afterward, staring at the blank screen. I wasn't hurt exactly. What right did I have to feel betrayed when I was the one who was married? But something had shifted. The compartment where I'd stored Tokyo was leaking, contaminating the other areas of my life. That night, I went home at a reasonable hour for the first time in weeks. Donovan was surprised to see me, already changed into worn sweatpants and reading a medical journal on the couch. You're home early, he said, making room for me beside him. The Jakarta team is transitioning, I said, settling next to him. There's a lull in the workflow. He nodded, returning to his reading. We sat in silence, and I was struck by how comfortable it was, how familiar. This was what I had chosen, this quiet companionship, this predictable life. It should have been reassuring. Instead, I felt a growing unease, a sense that I had built my life around avoiding something essential. Are you happy? I asked suddenly. Donovan looked up, startled. What? With your life? With us? Are you happy? He considered the question with the same thoughtfulness he brought to his medical cases. I'm content, he said finally. Are you asking because you're not? I don't know, I admitted. I've been thinking about what it means to be happy. If it's something you plan for or something that just happens. That doesn't sound like you, he said with a small smile. You plan everything. Maybe that's the problem. He set down his journal. Imogen, what's going on? Is this about work? No, I said. Yes, I don't know. I stood up, suddenly restless. I'm going to take a shower. Under the hot water, I tried to sort through my tangled emotions. What did I want? The security of my life with Donovan, the passion I found with Julian, something else entirely that I hadn't allowed myself to consider. The nausea hit me the next morning during a client meeting. I excused myself and barely made it to the bathroom before emptying my stomach. Food poisoning, I thought, remembering the suspicious sushi I'd had for lunch the day before. But when it happened again the next day and the day after that, always in the morning, a different possibility began to form in my mind. A possibility so at odds with my plans that I refused to consider it until a missed period forced me to face reality. I bought the pregnancy test during my lunch break and took it in the office bathroom, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read the instructions. When the two lines appeared, clear and undeniable, I sat on the closed toilet seat for a full 20 minutes, my mind completely blank for perhaps the first time in my adult life. Pregnant. It was impossible. Except it wasn't. The vasectomy had a failure rate of less than 1%, but I knew immediately that wasn't what had happened. This was Julian's child, conceived during our brief time together. The timing aligned perfectly. My first instinct was to schedule an abortion. It was the logical solution. Quick, definitive, a return to the status quo. I made the appointment for the following week, telling my assistant I had a dental procedure scheduled. I didn't tell Donovan. There was nothing to tell, I reasoned. By next week, it would be as if it never happened. Another secret to file away, another deviation managed and corrected. But as the appointment approached, I found myself unable to sleep, haunted by thoughts I couldn't articulate. I began researching obstetrics with the same thoroughness I brought to architectural projects, reading about fetal development and maternal health late into the night. The day the appointment arrived, I told Donovan I would be unreachable during my dental procedure. He kissed me goodbye, reminding me to pick up ice cream on the way home for my supposedly sore mouth. At the clinic, I filled out the paperwork mechanically, answering questions about my medical history, confirming my decision multiple times as required by state law. I was called back to a small room where a nurse performed an ultrasound to confirm the pregnancy and determine gestational age. "Would you like to see?" the nurse asked after taking measurements. I hesitated, then nodded. She turned the screen toward me. There wasn't much to see, a small oval with a flickering light at its center. A heartbeat. "You're about 8 weeks along," she said. "Everything looks normal." 8 weeks. Tokyo. Julian. A life forming from a moment I had tried to contain and separate from the rest of my existence. "I need a minute," I said. The nurse nodded. "Take your time. The doctor will be in shortly." Left alone, I stared at the printout she had given me, a grainy image of something both abstract and profoundly concrete. This wasn't in my plan. A child had never been in my plan. Yet here it was, growing inside me, undeniable. I thought of Donovan, of the wistfulness in his eyes when he spoke of his pediatric patients. I thought of his acquiescence to the vasectomy, his willingness to conform to my vision of our life together. I thought of the growing distance between us, the silences that had replaced conversation. And I thought of Julian, not with longing, but with clarity. What had drawn me to him wasn't love, but the chance to step outside the constraints I had placed on myself, to be someone unplanned and unpredictable, if only briefly. Now those two worlds were colliding in the most literal way possible. I couldn't compartmentalize this. I couldn't file it away. This was real, and it demanded a decision. When the doctor knocked and entered, I was already gathering my things. "I've changed my mind," I said. She nodded without judgment. "That's your right. We can discuss options for prenatal care if you'd like." "No," I said. "Thank you. I have a lot to figure out." I left the clinic and walked for hours, my mind racing with possibilities and consequences. By the time I returned home, I had formed a plan, not the kind of meticulous, outcome-oriented plan I usually created, but a framework for facing what came next. Donovan was already home, working on his laptop at the kitchen island. He looked up when I entered, his expression shifting from welcome to concern. "You don't look like someone who just had dental work," he said. "I didn't have dental work," I replied, setting down my bag. "We need to talk." He closed his laptop, giving me his full attention. It was one of the things I had always appreciated about him, his ability to be fully present when needed. "I'm pregnant," I said without preamble. His face went through a series of rapid transformations, surprise, confusion, joy, and then, as the implications set in, dawning suspicion. "That's impossible," he said slowly. "I had a vasectomy. We confirmed it was successful." "I know." "Then how?" He stopped, the answer clearly registering. "Who?" "A client," I said, unwilling to offer Julian's name, as if that small withholding could somehow lessen the betrayal. It was brief. "It's over." Donovan stood so abruptly that the bar stool toppled behind him. "When?" "Tokyo. 2 months ago." He paced to the window and back, his movements tight with contained fury. 2 months. "You've been lying to me for 2 months." "Yes." "Were there others?" "No. Just him, just that once." It was true, technically. The video calls, the messages, those hadn't been physical betrayals. "And now you're pregnant." He said it flatly, a statement of fact rather than a question. Yes? And you're telling me because you want my permission to get an abortion? My blessing? No, I said. I'm keeping it. That stopped him. What? I'm keeping the baby. He stared at me as if I had started speaking in a language he didn't understand. You. The woman who made me get a vasectomy because children were absolutely not in your life plan. That woman is now choosing to have a baby. Someone else's baby. Put that way, it sounded insane. Perhaps it was, but the decision felt more right than anything I had done in years. Yes, I said simply. Why? The word contained so many layers: confusion, hurt, anger, betrayal. I had asked myself the same question repeatedly since leaving the clinic. The answer wasn't simple, wasn't logical, wasn't something I could present in a PowerPoint with supporting data. Because I want to, I said finally. Because something in me has changed. And what about me? Where do I fit into this new plan of yours? This was the question I had been dreading, the one I had rehearsed answers for during my long walk home. None of them seemed adequate now, facing the raw pain in his eyes. That depends on you, I said. I want you to stay, to be part of this child's life, to be my husband. He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. You want me to raise another man's child. A child conceived while you were betraying our marriage. A child you decided to have without consulting me, after forcing me to ensure I could never father children of my own. When he laid it out like that, the selfishness of my position was undeniable. Yet I couldn't back down. Yes, that's what I'm asking. And if I say no, I took a deep breath, then you should leave. I won't force you to stay in a situation you can't accept. So that's my choice? Raise another man's child or leave my marriage? Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That's the choice. Donovan's face went completely still, the kind of stillness I recognized from his descriptions of critical moments in surgery when emotion had to be set aside for clarity. I need to call my doctor, he said. Your doctor? Why? Because vasectomies can fail, he said, pulling out his phone. It's rare, but it happens. I need to be tested. I felt a flash of shame, quickly replaced by indignation. You don't believe me? Frankly, no. He was already dialing. I don't know who you are right now, Imogen. I don't know what you're capable of. That stung, both because it was harsh and because it was fair. I had revealed myself to be someone capable of deception, someone who could compartmentalize betrayal. Why wouldn't he question everything I said? I'm not lying about this, I said. The baby isn't yours. He ignored me, speaking into the phone. Dr. Brenner? This is Donovan Wade. I need to schedule a sperm count test as soon as possible. Yes, it's urgent. After arranging an appointment for the next morning, he hung up and looked at me with cold determination. Until I know for certain, I'm reserving judgment. Fine, I said, oddly relieved at the delay. Get your test. He nodded once, then turned and walked upstairs. I heard the guest room door close firmly. That night, I lay awake in our bed, listening to the silence from across the hall. I had expected anger, hurt, perhaps even threats of divorce. I hadn't expected this clinical detachment, this need for verification. It was so like Donovan, thorough, careful, unwilling to act without complete information. It was what had drawn me to him initially, this methodical nature that matched my own. Now it felt like a rebuke, highlighting the impulsiveness of my actions with Julian, the chaos I was introducing into our ordered life. The next day, Donovan left early for his appointment. I went to work as usual, focusing on the Jakarta project with forced concentration. By mid-afternoon, I hadn't heard from him. I considered texting but decided against it. This was his process to work through. I would respect that much at least. I was reviewing climate models when my office phone rang. Donovan's number. Hello? I've just left Dr. Brenner's office, he said without preamble. The vasectomy is intact, no sperm present. I closed my eyes. I told you. Yes, you did. His voice was flat. I'll be picking up some things from the house this evening. I'll stay with my brother for a few days while I figure out next steps. Donovan, wait, I said, suddenly panicked. Can we talk about this? What's there to talk about? You've presented me with an impossible choice. I need time to process it. It doesn't have to be impossible, I said. Many couples work through infidelity. This isn't just infidelity, Imogen. This is you deliberately getting pregnant by another man after making me get a vasectomy. This is you unilaterally deciding to keep a child conceived in betrayal, then expecting me to raise it as my own or walk away from 10 years of marriage. What exactly are we supposed to work through? Put that way, it did sound impossible, yet I couldn't let go of the hope that there was a way forward, a solution I hadn't yet identified. I love you, I said, the words awkward in my mouth. We had never been an overtly affectionate couple, preferring to demonstrate commitment through actions rather than declarations. Do you? He asked, and I heard genuine curiosity beneath the hurt. Because I'm not sure you know what that means. Before I could respond, he continued, I'll be by around 7 to get some clothes and essentials. It would be easier if you weren't there. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then at the Jakarta models still displayed on my computer screen. Columns of data, climate projections, sustainability metrics, all the quantifiable elements I excelled at managing. None of them offered any guidance for the human disaster unfolding in my personal life. I left the office at 6, not wanting to make things harder for Donovan. As I drove home, I tried to identify what I was feeling. Grief? Certainly. Fear? Absolutely. But beneath those was something else, something that had been growing since that moment in the clinic when I decided to keep the baby. A strange, fierce determination. I had spent my entire life charting careful courses and following them precisely. This pregnancy, unplanned, unwanted, then suddenly inexplicably precious, represented a complete departure from that pattern. Yet instead of terrifying me, it awakened something I hadn't known existed, a capacity for embracing uncertainty. At home, I packed an overnight bag and wrote Donovan a note. I'm staying at the Marriott downtown tonight to give you space. When you're ready to talk, whether that's tomorrow or next month, I'll be here. I know I'd ask the impossible of you. I know I've hurt you in ways I can never fully repair. But I also know that what we built together was real and valuable. Whatever you decide, please know that. I left before 7, driving aimlessly for a while before checking into the hotel. In the anonymous quiet of the room, I placed a hand on my still flat stomach, trying to connect with the life growing inside me. It didn't feel real yet, just an abstract concept, a cluster of cells triggering hormonal changes. Yet I had chosen this. Against all logic, against my lifelong plans, against the stability of my marriage, I had chosen this path. Why? The question haunted me as I lay sleepless in the unfamiliar bed. It wasn't maternal instinct. I had never experienced that pull toward motherhood that other women described. It wasn't love for Julian. What we shared had been intense but superficial, a connection born of novelty rather than depth. What then? What had compelled me to destroy the life I had so carefully constructed? The answer came as dawn broke over the city's skyline: freedom. Not from responsibility. I was taking on the ultimate responsibility in choosing to become a single mother. Freedom from the tyranny of my own rigid planning, from the illusion of control I had maintained so fiercely. In making this one wild, uncharacteristic choice, I was breaking the patterns that had defined and confined me. The realization didn't excuse my betrayal of Donovan. Nothing could. But it helped me understand why, faced with the option to terminate the pregnancy and return to my carefully ordered life, I had chosen disorder instead. I checked out of the hotel and went directly to work, throwing myself into the Jakarta project with renewed focus. If Donovan chose to leave, the most likely outcome, I acknowledged grimly, I would need financial stability more than ever. Days passed without word from him. I returned to our home, which felt larger and emptier without his presence. I resisted the urge to call or text, respecting his need for space. Instead, I began researching prenatal care, finding an obstetrician recommended for high-risk pregnancies due to my age, scheduling an initial appointment. A week after our confrontation, as I was preparing for bed, the doorbell rang. Donovan stood on the porch, looking exhausted. "Can I come in?" he asked formally, as if he were a visitor rather than the co-owner of the house. Of course, I stepped aside. "Would you like some tea?" "No." He walked to the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." I sat in the chair across from him, giving him space. "I'm listening." "I've been angry," he began. "Angrier than I've ever been. At you, obviously, but also at myself, for going along with the vasectomy when I wasn't completely convinced. For letting you dictate so many of our major life decisions, for not noticing that something was wrong between us. There wasn't anything obviously wrong, I said. That's part of the problem. We were functioning just fine. Functioning isn't the same as thriving, he said. We became efficient roommates, not partners. I share the blame for that. His willingness to accept partial responsibility caught me off guard. It was so like Donovan to be fair, even in the face of profound betrayal. The blame for the affair is entirely mine, I said. You didn't drive me to it. I made that choice. He nodded. Thank you for acknowledging that. But the state of our marriage before the affair, that's on both of us. I waited, sensing he had more to say. I've spoken with my therapist, he continued. I've talked to my brother. I've prayed, which is something I haven't done much of since medical school. And I've come to a decision. My heart hammered in my chest. What decision? I can't raise another man's child, he said simply. Not under these circumstances. Not when that child would be a daily reminder of your betrayal. It would poison any chance of healing for both of us. I nodded, my throat tight. I had expected this answer, had prepared for it, yet hearing the words still felt like a physical blow. I understand, I managed. But I'm not ready to end our marriage, he continued. Not yet. We built something valuable, even if we've lost sight of it recently. I think we owe it to ourselves to at least try to find a way forward. Hope flickered, cautious and fragile. What are you suggesting? I'm going to stay with Aaron for now. I need the space. And you need to figure out what you really want, beyond just keeping this pregnancy. What kind of life are you envisioning? What role do you see for me realistically? I don't know, I admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead, he smiled without humor. That might be a first for you. This whole situation is a first for me, I said. I've never been so unsure of my next steps. Maybe that's not a bad thing, he said. Maybe you need to live in the uncertainty for a while instead of planning your way through it. The insight struck me as profound, especially coming from someone who had every right to be furious with me rather than offering wisdom. How can I make this right? I asked. I don't know that you can, he said honestly, but complete transparency would be a start. No more compartmentalizing, no more separate lives. I can do that, I promised. He stood. I should go. Aaron's expecting me back. When will I see you again? I don't know. I need time. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. I want the name of the father. I tensed. Why? Because I deserve to know. Because keeping it secret is another form of compartmentalization. He was right, of course. Still, I hesitated. His name is Julian Mercer. He was the client liaison for the Jakarta project. He's married with children. He's taken a position in London to reconcile with his wife. Donovan absorbed this information with a nod. Does he know about the pregnancy? No, and he won't. He made his choice before I even knew about the baby. This is my responsibility, not his. That's your decision to make, Donovan said. But secrecy has a way of unraveling eventually. You should prepare for that possibility. With that parting observation, he left, the door closing quietly behind him. I remained in the living room for a long time afterward, turning our conversation over in my mind. He hadn't forgiven me. That would be premature, perhaps impossible, but he hadn't closed the door completely either. It was more than I deserved. The following weeks established a new rhythm. I concentrated on work during the day, researched pregnancy and childcare in the evenings, and attended weekly therapy sessions at Donovan's suggestion. We communicated primarily by text, brief exchanges about household matters or logistical issues. Twice, he came to the house when I was at work to collect more of his things. At my first obstetrician appointment, hearing the heartbeat made the pregnancy suddenly real in a way it hadn't been before. Leaving the office with ultrasound images in hand, I was overwhelmed by conflicting emotions, awe at the life growing inside me, grief for the marriage I had damaged, fear of the unknown path ahead. On impulse, I texted Donovan. Had first appointment today. Everything looks good. Doctor says I'm 12 weeks along. His response came hours later. Thank you for letting me know. Take care of yourself. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was communication, a thin thread connecting us across the chasm I had created. As the first trimester ended, morning sickness faded, replaced by a surprising energy. I threw myself into preparations, converting the home office into a nursery, researching childcare options that would accommodate my work schedule, adjusting my project timeline to account for maternity leave. Donovan texted occasionally, asking how I was feeling or offering the name of a colleague who specialized in high-risk obstetrics. There was care in these messages, a concern for my well-being that transcended his anger over the situation. Then came the text I have been hoping for. Can we meet this weekend to talk? Saturday, 2 p.m. at Riverfront Park. A neutral location, public but with enough privacy for a difficult conversation. I agreed immediately. The day was unseasonably warm for autumn, the park filled with families enjoying the lingering summer-like weather. Donovan was waiting on a bench overlooking the river, dressed in casual clothes I didn't recognize. New purchases for his separate life, I realized with a pang. He stood as I approached, his eyes immediately going to my midsection where a small but noticeable bump was visible beneath my loose top. "You're showing," he said, his expression unreadable. "Just started last week," I confirmed, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "May I sit?" He nodded, settling back on the bench with enough space between us for comfort. "How have you been?" I asked. "Managing," he said. "Work keeps me busy. Aaron's place is comfortable enough, but I miss having my own space." "You could come home," I offered cautiously. "Not yet," he said. "Maybe not ever." That's partly why I wanted to talk today. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I can and can't accept. I braced myself. "And what have you decided?" He looked out at the river, gathering his thoughts. "I've decided that I can't be a father to this child. Not in the way a child deserves. There would always be a barrier there, a reminder of how they came to be. That's not fair to any of us." I nodded, having expected this conclusion. "I understand." But he continued, "I also can't just walk away from 10 years together without being absolutely certain it's the right choice. So I have a counter-proposal." "I'm listening," I said, hope flickering despite my efforts to manage expectations. "I want a trial separation, legally formalized. 6 months, during which we both live independently, attend individual and couples therapy, and reassess whether there's a path forward for us as a couple, separate from your role as a mother." It wasn't what I had hoped for, but it was more than I had feared. And after the 6 months, we decide whether to reconcile or divorce. Either way, we'll need a clear custody and support arrangement that acknowledges I am not this child's father, legally or emotionally. The terms were fair, more than fair given the circumstances. Yet I felt a deep sadness at the clinical way he outlined our future, as if we were negotiating a business arrangement rather than fighting for our marriage. If we did reconcile, I asked, what would that look like? How would we handle the baby? "I don't know," he admitted. "I can't see that far ahead. I know I would support you as your husband. I would contribute financially. I would treat your child with kindness and respect. But I can't promise to love them as my own." That would be a lie. His honesty hurt, but I appreciated it. False promises would only lead to greater pain later. "I accept your proposal," I said. 6 months, starting when? "I've already spoken to a lawyer. We can file the separation agreement next week. The 6 months would start then." Of course he had already consulted a lawyer. Donovan was nothing if not thorough. "All right," I agreed. "I'll need to find my own counsel to review the agreement. Of course." He stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "My lawyer will be in touch with the paperwork." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Donovan, thank you for not just walking away, for being willing to try." He paused, looking back at me with an expression that mingled weariness and residual affection. "I made vows, Imogen, for better or worse. This is definitely the worst part, but vows should mean something." With that he walked away, leaving me on the bench with my hand resting on the small swell that held a future I had never planned for, but was now determined to embrace. I apologize for the error. You're right to be frustrated. Here's a properly sized part 4 that follows the outline in about 2,000 words. The separation agreement was finalized with clinical efficiency. I retained the house, Donovan took a furnished apartment downtown, and we divided our assets with minimal conflict. The document made no mention of the pregnancy. That would be addressed later, depending on the outcome of our separation. In those first weeks alone, I oscillated between fierce determination and crushing doubt. There were moments when I felt liberated, free to embrace this unexpected path without negotiation or compromise. Then would come the nights when the silence of the house pressed in on me, when I would reach across the bed only to find empty space, when the magnitude of what I had done and what I had lost overwhelmed me. work became both refuge and battlefield. The Jakarta project demanded increasing attention as we approached critical design milestones. I threw myself into it, grateful for the distraction but increasingly aware of the physical limitations my pregnancy imposed. By my 5th month, the 16-hour days I had once managed effortlessly now left me exhausted. For the first time in my career, I began delegating tasks I would previously have handled myself. My assistant, Natalie, noticed the change. "You're actually letting other people do things," she observed one afternoon. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just adapting," I replied, not mentioning the pregnancy which, despite my growing belly, I had managed to conceal beneath structured clothing and strategic scheduling of in-person meetings. "It's a good change," she said. "The team feels more invested when you trust them with important components." Her observation lingered with me. Trust, letting go of control, allowing others to contribute without micromanagement, had never been my strength. Yet here I was, learning to delegate by necessity and discovering unexpected benefits. These philosophical musings were interrupted by practical realities when, at 22 weeks, the firm's HR director requested a meeting about my maternity leave. I hadn't even filed the paperwork yet. Another failure of foresight from someone who prided herself on meticulous planning. That evening, alone in what had once been our home office and was now a half-finished nursery, I confronted the gap between my projections and reality. 8 weeks seemed ample when viewed as data points on a timeline. But what did I actually know about recovering from childbirth while caring for a newborn? About balancing the demands of motherhood and career without a partner's support. For once in my life, I had no reference points, no precedents to analyze, no expert opinions I could synthesize into a coherent plan. I was navigating uncharted territory without a map. The weight of this realization pressed down on me as I sat amidst paint samples and unassembled furniture. Tears came, not the occasional emotional overflows I had experienced since becoming pregnant, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to emerge from some long-sealed vault within me. I cried for the marriage I had damaged, for the husband who had loved me in his quiet, steady way until I betrayed that love. I cried for the child who would be born into complexity and divided loyalties. And I cried for myself, not out of self-pity, but in recognition of how far I had strayed from the certainties that once defined me. The next day, I called my sister Vivian. We had never been close. She was 8 years older, had chosen a life of artistic pursuits and spontaneous adventures that contrasted sharply with my ordered existence. We spoke a few times a year, exchanging surface updates without delving into emotional territory. "Imogen," she answered, surprise evident in her voice. "Is everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "I'm pregnant," separated from Donovan, and feeling completely lost. "Can we talk?" She arrived in 45 minutes, sweeping into the house with the whirlwind energy I remembered from childhood. Vivian was my opposite in almost every way, impulsive where I was methodical, expressive where I was reserved, creative where I was analytical. Over tea, I told her everything: the affair, the pregnancy, the confrontation with Donovan, the separation agreement. I omitted nothing, neither my actions nor my rationalizations. It was the most honest I had been with anyone, perhaps even myself. "Well," she said when I finished, "you've certainly made a mess of things, haven't you?" The bluntness was refreshing after months of careful conversations with lawyers, therapists, and colleagues. "Yes," I agreed, "I have. That you've been hiding from real life for as long as I can remember," she told me. "That your schedules and projections and 5-year plans have been armor against vulnerability and uncertainty. That this mess, painful as it is, might be the best thing that's ever happened to you." How is destroying my marriage and becoming a single mother at 37 the best thing that could happen to me? Because for the first time since we were children, you can't control the outcome. You have to actually live in the mess, feel the feelings, make mistakes, be human. Her words hit with unexpected force, echoing thoughts that had been forming in my own mind, but that I hadn't fully articulated. "I don't know how to live without a plan," I confessed. "Nobody does at first," she said, her voice gentler, "but you learn. Day by day, moment by moment. You try things, you fail, you adjust, you keep going." Having Vivian in the house was both comforting and disruptive. The weekends stretched into a week as she helped transform the nursery from a sterile, catalog-perfect space into something vibrant and personal. We argued over color choices and furniture placement, compromised on storage solutions, and eventually created a room that reflected neither of our individual aesthetics, but something new that emerged from our collaboration. "You need to learn to collaborate more," she observed as we admired the finished space. "Not everything has to be done your way to be done right." After Vivian left, the house felt different, less like a showcase and more like a home, imperfect but alive. I began making other changes, small disruptions to the rigid patterns that had governed my existence. Rearranging furniture on impulse, trying new recipes without meticulously following instructions, answering emails based on interest rather than order of receipt. My therapist noted the shift. "You seem more present," she observed during our weekly session. "Less focused on outcomes and more engaged with the process." That evening, I composed an email to Donovan, not the carefully crafted, emotionally strategic message I would have written months ago, but a genuine expression of where I found myself. I told him I missed him, acknowledged my controlling nature, and expressed how the pregnancy was changing me in unexpected ways. I sent it before I could revise it into something more strategic and less vulnerable. 3 days later, his response came, thoughtful, honest, and ending with an invitation to meet for coffee the following week. We arranged to meet Tuesday at Compass Coffee. The sharp pain woke me at 3 a.m. Monday night, a cramping that started in my lower back and wrapped around to my abdomen. After calling my obstetrician's after-hours line, I was instructed to go to the emergency room immediately. Despite our separation, I called Donovan. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Imogen, what's wrong?" "I'm having pain," I said. "The doctor wants me to go to the ER." "I know it's the middle of the night and we're separated, but I'm scared and I don't want to do this alone." "I'm on my way," he interrupted immediately. 15 minutes. When he arrived, I was doubled over with another contraction. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of pain and fear. Within 20 minutes of arrival, I was in an examination room with a fetal monitor strapped to my belly. "The heartbeat is strong," the resident assured us. When we were alone, Donovan pulled a chair close to the bed. "How are you holding up?" "Better now that the pain is subsiding," I said. "Thank you for coming. I know this isn't your responsibility." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. "Of course it's my responsibility. We're still married, Imogen." The simple kindness undid me. "I'm so scared," I admitted through tears. "What if something's wrong with the baby?" "Hey," he said, taking my hand. "Complications happen in pregnancy. They're not moral judgments." Dr. Pottle diagnosed preterm labor but assured us we caught it early. "You'll need hospital observation for at least 24 hours, then bed rest and limited activity. You're at risk for preterm delivery, which would be extremely dangerous at 23 weeks. I'll make sure she follows all recommendations," Donovan said, surprising me with his assumption of involvement. After she left, I turned to Donovan. "You don't have to stay. I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. Despite the uncomfortable hospital bed, I fell into an exhausted sleep, my hand still in his. When I woke hours later, Donovan was still there, looking rumpled but alert. "Donovan," I began, "I don't deserve your kindness after what I did." "This isn't about what you deserve," he said. "It's about what kind of person I want to be. When you called last night, I realized something important. Despite all the pain and anger, despite the separation, I still care what happens to you. That hasn't changed." I don't know what to say to that. "You don't need to say anything. We still have a lot to work through. And one night doesn't fix the fundamental issues. But maybe it's a reminder that beneath all the hurt, there's still something worth salvaging." It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was something equally precious, the possibility of both, someday, if we continued the hard work of rebuilding trust and redefining our relationship. Dr. Pottle discharged me that afternoon with strict instructions for bed rest and regular monitoring. Donovan surprised me by offering to stay at the house in the guest room until my condition stabilized. "Are you sure?" I asked. "What about our separation agreement?" "This is a medical situation. I think we can make an exception," he said. "Unless you prefer I didn't." "I'd appreciate the help," I said. "I just don't want you to feel obligated." "It's not obligation," he said. "It's concern, for both of you." His inclusion of the baby in his consideration surprised me more than his offer to stay. Perhaps somewhere in the painful process of separation, something new was beginning to form, not a restoration of what was broken, but the creation of something different, something that acknowledged our painful past while leaving room for an uncertain but hopeful future. "Let's start with where we are now." I suggested, cradling the warm mug between my palms. Not where we've been or where we might go, but this exact moment. Donovan nodded, considering. Right now, I'm here because I'm concerned about your health and the baby's. I'm still hurt and angry about what happened, but those feelings don't override my commitment to your well-being. And I'm grateful for your help, more than I can express, I said. But I don't want gratitude to complicate things. It doesn't have to be complicated. We can acknowledge what we feel without making decisions based solely on emotions. The statement was so characteristic of Donovan, measured, thoughtful, focused on finding balance. It was what had drawn me to him initially, this steadiness that complemented my more rigid approach to life. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I said, about why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, but to understand it. And what have you concluded? That the affair wasn't really about Julian. It was about me trying to escape the constraints I'd put on myself. The rigid plans, the controlled emotions, the perfectly organized life that left no room for spontaneity or vulnerability. I paused, uncertain if I should continue, but committed to complete honesty. And I think the pregnancy decision came from the same place. For once, I chose something that wasn't in my master plan, something unpredictable and chaotic and real. He was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. That makes sense in a way. But it doesn't explain why you expected me to accept raising another man's child. That wasn't just spontaneity, Imogen. That was asking me to bear the consequences of your choices. You're right, I admitted. I was still thinking selfishly. I wanted both things, the freedom of my choice and the security of our marriage. I wanted you to accommodate me, just like you always had. It wasn't fair. No, it wasn't. His voice was calm but firm. And I need you to understand something important. My hesitation about raising this child isn't about biology or ego. It's about starting a family based on deception. That's not a foundation for a healthy relationship for any of us, including the baby. The truth of his words hit me with unexpected force. In all my agonizing over our situation, I had focused on whether Donovan could accept the baby's biological origins. I hadn't considered the deeper issue, the breach of trust that would permanently shape our family dynamic. I understand, I said quietly, and you're right. He looked surprised at my easy agreement. I expected more resistance. I'm trying to listen more than I argue these days. It's not my natural state, but I'm working on it. A small smile flickered across his face. I've noticed. We sipped our coffee in companionable silence for a few minutes, the tension between us noticeably eased. May I ask you something personal? I ventured. Go ahead. If the circumstances were different, if we had decided together to have a child, if there had been no betrayal, would you have wanted to be a father? He took his time answering, his expression thoughtful. Yes, he said finally. I think I would have. My hesitation was never about not wanting children. It was about the timing, our careers, the lifestyle changes we'd need to make. But if you had been open to reconsideration, I would have been too. The revelation lodged painfully in my chest. Another opportunity lost to my rigid planning, my unwillingness to adapt, my need to control all variables. I wish I had known that. I wish I had asked. I wish I had been clearer, he countered. I didn't fight very hard for what I wanted. That's a pattern I'm working to change. We both have patterns to break, I acknowledged. The conversation continued deep into the evening, covering territory we had never explored during our marriage. Hopes we had left unspoken, fears we had hidden from each other, compromises that had felt insignificant at the time but had accumulated into resentments. There were moments of painful honesty, unexpected laughter, and periods of reflective silence. Through it all, something new emerged between us, not the careful dance of our earlier marriage, nor the wounded distance of our separation, but a genuine connection built on mutual vulnerability. When Donovan finally stood to clear our empty mugs, it was past midnight. We should both get some rest, he said, especially you. This was good, I said, not wanting the moment to end. Maybe we could talk again tomorrow, he nodded. I'd like that. Good night, Imogen. Good night, Donovan. In the weeks that followed, a new pattern established itself. During the day, we maintained our separate lives. Donovan at the hospital, me working remotely on the Jakarta project. In the evenings, we would talk, not just about our relationship, but about our individual journeys, our evolving perspectives, our hopes for the future. My pregnancy progressed without further complications. At 28 weeks, Dr. Patel relaxed some restrictions, allowing me more movement around the house and slightly longer work hours. Donovan remained at the house, his temporary stay extending without formal discussion, the guest room becoming unquestionably his space. We were not reconciled, not in the full sense. Physical intimacy remained a clear boundary neither of us attempted to cross. Yet something was healing between us, a foundation being rebuilt with new materials, stronger perhaps than the original construction. At 30 weeks, as we shared a quiet dinner, Donovan surprised me with a question. "Have you thought about names for the baby?" It was the first time he had initiated a conversation specifically about the child rather than my health or the pregnancy in general. "A few," I admitted. "I'm leaning toward Eliza if it's a girl, after my grandmother." "Eliza Wade," he said, testing the sound of it. "It's a good name." I felt a surge of emotion at hearing him include his surname so naturally. "You think she should have your last name?" "I think we need to discuss that possibility," he said carefully. "Along with other legal matters." "What legal matters?" "If we decide to stay together, if I take on a paternal role, we should formalize it. Adoption, perhaps. Clear legal standing that can't be challenged later." My heart raced at his words. "Are you saying you've decided?" "I'm saying I'm considering options I wasn't ready to consider before." He set down his fork, giving me his full attention. "I've been watching you these past weeks. The way you've changed, the work you've done on yourself. The woman sitting across from me now isn't the same one who gave me that impossible ultimatum months ago." "I hope not," I said softly. "And I'm not the same man who walked away that night. We've both evolved." He reached across the table to take my hand. "I can't promise anything yet, but I'm open to building a future together, all three of us, if we continue on this path." Tears welled in my eyes. "That's more than I deserve." "It's not about deserving," he reminded me. "It's about choosing who we want to be going forward." The remaining weeks of my pregnancy passed in a state of cautious optimism. We attended birthing classes together, finished preparing the nursery, discussed parenting philosophies and practical arrangements for after the birth. Donovan accompanied me to medical appointments, asking questions and taking notes with the same focused attention he brought to his own patients' care. At my 38-week appointment, Dr. Patel announced that everything looked perfect for a natural delivery whenever the baby decided to arrive. "Any day now," she said with a smile. "Are you ready?" Donovan and I exchanged glances. "As ready as we can be," he answered for both of us. That night, as we sat together reviewing a birth plan I had meticulously crafted, "Some habits die hard," Donovan set aside the document with uncharacteristic abruptness. "Before the baby comes, there's something I need to say," he began, his expression serious. My stomach tightened with sudden anxiety. "What is it?" "I've made a decision." He took a deep breath. "I want us to move forward together as a family. I want to be Eliza's father in every way that matters. Not because I've forgotten what happened, but because I've chosen to build something new from it." Joy and disbelief warred within me. "Are you certain?" "This isn't just because the birth is imminent. I've been certain for weeks," he admitted. "But I wanted to be sure you knew it was a deliberate choice, not an emotional reaction or a sense of obligation. I've thought this through from every angle, discussed it with my therapist, examined my own motivations. This is what I want." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. Just know that when Eliza arrives, she'll have both of us, fully committed to her and to each other." I moved from my chair to sit beside him on the sofa, closing the physical distance that had remained between us even as the emotional gap had narrowed. "Thank you," I whispered, resting my head on his shoulder. He put his arm around me, his hand gentle on my rounded belly. "We still have work to do. This isn't a fairy tale ending where everything is magically resolved." "I know," I assured him. "I'm in it for the long haul." 2 days later, labor began, gradual at first, then progressing with the relentless intensity I had read about but could never have truly prepared for. Donovan drove me to the hospital with calm efficiency, his medical training evident in his steady responses to my increasingly vocal discomfort. The labor was long but uncomplicated. Throughout the process, Donovan remained by my side, offering encouragement and practical support. When transition hit and the pain peaked beyond what I had imagined possible, he anchored me, his voice a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. "You're doing amazingly," he said during a particularly difficult contraction. "Just breathe through it. I'm right here." In that moment, focused on bringing our child into the world, I felt a surge of love for this man who had chosen to stay despite every reason to leave, who had found the strength to forgive what many would consider unforgivable, who had worked as hard on himself as I had on myself, creating space for a new kind of partnership between us. Eliza Vivian Wade was born at 3:47 a.m. after 16 hours of labor. When the doctor placed her on my chest, red-faced and indignant, I experienced an emotion I had never felt before, a fierce, protective love that defied analysis or categorization. "She's perfect," I whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. Donovan leaned close, his face awestruck. "She is." He touched her cheek gently. "Hello, Eliza. We've been waiting for you." The simplicity of his greeting, the natural way he included himself, confirmed what his words had promised. Whatever biology might dictate, in the ways that truly mattered, he had chosen to be this child's father. The next hours passed in a blur of medical checks, first feedings, and the peculiar exhaustion that somehow coexisted with overwhelming joy. When visitors were finally permitted, Vivian arrived first, bringing a handmade mobile for the crib and barely contained excitement. "Let me see my niece," she demanded, sweeping into the room with her characteristic energy. She stopped short at the sight of Donovan holding Eliza while I rested. Well, this is a development. It's a long story," I told her. "The best ones usually are." She approached Donovan, peeking at the bundle in his arms. "May I?" He transferred Eliza carefully. "Support her head. There you go." Vivian cradled the baby expertly, despite her claims of having no maternal instinct. "She has your chin, Imogen, and your forehead, Donovan." The comment, deliberately ignoring biological realities in favor of chosen family, brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I mouthed silently over Eliza's head. She winked in response. "I always knew you two would figure it out eventually." After Vivian left, promising to return the next day with Eliza's first art supplies, a nurse came to check my vitals and the baby's. "Your daughter is doing beautifully," she told us. "And Dad, you're a natural." Most first-time fathers aren't nearly so comfortable handling newborns. "I have some experience with small humans," Donovan said with a smile, "but none as important as this one." When we were alone again, with Eliza sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside my bed, Donovan sat on the edge of the mattress and took my hand. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, sore, happy, terrified." I smiled ruefully. "All at once. That sounds about right. What about you?" I asked. "How are you feeling about all of this?" He considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Content," he said finally. "Not in the passive sense, but in the active one. I'm exactly where I want to be, doing exactly what I want to do. It's a choice I make gladly. Even knowing how we got here." "The past is part of our story," he acknowledged. "But it doesn't define our future. What defines us is how we move forward from here, the commitment we make to each other and to Eliza, the values we live by, the family we build together." His words resonated with everything I had come to understand through our painful journey, that life cannot be perfectly planned or controlled, that relationships require constant adaptation and growth, that forgiveness is not a single act but a daily practice. "I love you," I said, the words simple but profound. "Not because you've forgiven me or accepted Eliza, but because of who you are, because even in the hardest moments you chose to be true to your best self." "I love you too," he replied. "Not the perfect, controlled version you tried to be for so long, but the real Imogen, complex, fallible, growing." Eliza stirred in her bassinet, making the small mewling sounds that preceded hunger. Donovan lifted her gently and placed her in my arms. As she latched and began to nurse, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger with surprising strength. "I never imagined this," I confessed, watching her face. "Any of it. The affair, the pregnancy, the separation, the reconciliation, none of it was in my plan. And yet here we are." Donovan said, his arm around my shoulders, his presence warm and solid beside me. "Here we are," I agreed, looking from my daughter to my husband, marveling at the family we had become, not through careful design, but through painful mistakes, hard-earned growth, and the courage to embrace a future that couldn't be calculated or controlled, only lived one uncertain, beautiful day at a time. 2 weeks later, we brought Eliza home to the house that had once been a showcase for my perfectly planned life, and was now a testament to adaptation and compromise. The nursery Vivienne had helped transform awaited its tiny occupant. Donovan's belongings had migrated from the guest room back to our shared bedroom. Photos of 3 generations of family, including a prominently displayed picture of Vivian holding Eliza in the hospital, lined the hallway. As we settled into the new rhythms of life with a newborn, the sleepless nights, the constant adjustments, the learning curve neither of our professional expertise had prepared us for, I found unexpected joy in the very chaos I had once feared. There was a richness to this unplanned existence, a depth of experience that my carefully orchestrated life had never approached. Donovan proved to be the kind of father I might have expected had I been paying closer attention all along, patient, attentive, fully engaged. He took night shifts without complaint, mastered the art of one-handed diaper changes, sang impromptu lullabies in a surprisingly melodic voice. In his interactions with Eliza, I saw none of the reservation he had feared, only genuine love for the child he had chosen as his own. One evening as we sat together on the porch swing, Eliza sleeping peacefully against his chest, I asked the question that had been on my mind since the hospital. "Do you ever think about Julian, about biological connections?" Donovan considered this seriously as he did all important questions. Sometimes, he admitted, not with jealousy or resentment, but with a kind of academic curiosity. Nature versus nurture, genetic influence versus environmental factors. "And does it bother you?" "No. Biology is just one aspect of parenthood, and not necessarily the most significant one." He looked down at Eliza, his expression softening. "What matters is who's there for the middle-of-the-night feedings, who kisses scraped knees, who helps with homework and attends recitals and teaches values. That's fatherhood. That's what I'm committed to." His answer reassured me in a way that simple declarations might not have. This wasn't blind acceptance or willful ignorance of complications, but a thoughtful embracing of our complex reality. "What about you?" he asked. "Do you think about him?" "Not really," I said honestly. "He was never important in himself. He was a catalyst for change, nothing more." Donovan nodded, understanding in a way few others would have. "We should talk about legal matters soon. Adoption paperwork, estate planning, all those pragmatic considerations. Back to planning and organizing." I teased gently. "Some planning is necessary," he pointed out. "Especially when it comes to protecting the people we love." "I know. And we will handle all those details." I leaned against his shoulder, watching our daughter sleep. "But tonight, can we just be here? Present in this moment? I can think of nowhere else I'd rather be," he said, and as the evening settled around us, I felt a peace I had never known in all my carefully planned existence. The peace of being exactly where I belonged, with exactly the people I was meant to love, in a life I could never have designed but was more beautiful for its very unexpectedness.